Hello everyone, this is Chris, and Caves and Cliffs Part 2 is considered to be another one of Minecraft's great updates. Up there with Update Aquatic, Village and Pillage, the Nether Update, and even Caves and Cliffs Part 1. But what are the features that's actually getting so many people excited for this 1.18 update? Well, with one exception, there really isn't any types of new features, items, or anything like that. All of those items came actually in the last update, 1.17. And if you're a creative player, you might be a little bit disappointed in hearing that, but this update, even without having any new types of features, actually does have something for those creative players, in being that the world now is much more vertical than it used to be. Instead of it going from Y0 all the way up to Y256, it now goes from -64 all the way up to Y320, in addition a 50% increase of the vertical building space. And you really get a sense as to how vertical the world is by falling from the top of the world all the way down to the bottom of the world. So if we just keep falling down and down and down, and yeah, that took a long time. That took much longer than previously expected and previously before. And the reason the world is much more vertical is to give an opportunity to make caves and cliffs much more interesting, with much more mega caves than what we were previously expecting. Something like this, or something even bigger than that. We could find caves that are absolutely massive. There's also a whole bunch of different types of cave shapes and cave variants and other types of things like that. Now keep in mind that we aren't losing the old types of caves. We are still going to expect to find them inside the world. There's just going to be a whole bunch of other types of cave variants too. And one of the more obvious things is the fact that when you go below Y0, the caves will actually now turn into the deep slate block right here, along with a few blobs of tuff and things like that around the place. That way you can distinguish yourself from when you are much lower in the world to when you are much higher in the world. And another way to distinguish where you are is actually in the type of cave you're in, such as I believe this is called the cheese cave, which has a whole bunch of, I guess, Swiss cheese type things around it, with all these mega stalactite and stalagmite pillars inside these one mega caves. And another type of cave is actually called the spaghetti cave, which is these really thin, really narrow types of cave paths around here, kind of similar to the old ones we used to be used to. But something else we're not quite so used to is this thing right here, which is known as an iron blob, which kind of speaks for itself. It's pretty much a mega blob of iron. These things are relatively rare, but the main reason you want to find it is, yeah, as the name implies, there is a big old blob of iron. So in case you are trying to get yourself lots of iron, then yeah, this is kind of a valid way on doing it. And it's not just going to be iron blobs around the place, there's also going to be copper blobs. And unlike iron blobs, where there's a whole bunch of tuff surrounding it, the copper blobs, I believe, are surrounded in a whole bunch of granite. So yeah, in case you're looking for a whole bunch of copper, then keep an eye out for the granite around the caves. And I guess while you're looking around the caves, you might want to stop off at one of the two cave biomes inside this one update, known as the dripstone biome right here, which is, again, as the name implies, a cave completely filled with dripstone right here. So yeah, no longer are you going to have to use this sort of tricky way and actually farming it or something like that. You just have to find yourself one of these biomes and then just clear it out completely. And the other type of cave biome we're going to find inside of 1.18 is known as the lush cave biome, filled with all the lush cave blocks we saw in 1.17. And one of the new ones, which was only available in creative, was known as the spore blossom right here. And yeah, emits a whole bunch of particles, making it much more immersive, as we can see right here. But yeah, as of this one update, it will now be obtainable inside of survival. As well as that, these biomes also have a lot of clay. And yeah, clay before was very tricky to get your hands on. You'd have to go into like rivers or lakes or swamps or something like that. But yeah, in case you do want to get lots and lots more clay than you never were able to before, then this is certainly the place you're going to want to get it. But yeah, not only are caves being updated underground, the surface is actually getting a pretty major overhaul too. First off, before 1.18, the way mountains would generate would depend on the biome. Now that is no longer the case. Now it is more dependent on just where the biomes are and where the world actually tends to generate in. This means that every single biome that had a pretty hard cap, such as these Badlands, now kind of no longer does. Now they could go up pretty much as high as the generation and the location of the area actually would want to go. And this one goes up to 136, which for 1.18 isn't too incredibly high, but it is much higher than what we would normally expect for these Badlands hills to generate at. As well as that, some of the older biomes, such as Rivers, got a mega upgrade. Now, instead of them being a pretty small, at most 10 block wide thing, it now feels much more like Rivers, being much wider than they were before. And there are times where they do get a little bit slimmer here and there, but for the most part, they are way wider than they usually were. But the old biomes aren't the only thing that's been added and changed. There's also been a handful of new types of biomes added into the game. First off, with probably one of the most least interesting biomes, the meadow right here, which is a pretty barren area with mainly flowers and things like that, but typically this is one of the places that can, for the most part, go up to around about 100 or 120 in most scenarios. Yeah, we're at 125 right now, so this is one of the biomes that could go up kind of decently high, but not too incredibly high. One of the slightly more interesting biomes is this one right here, which is called a mountain grove. And yeah, it's not really mountainous, but it is very grove-like, and it is one of the places where you could actually find powdered snow actually generating into the world naturally. And I believe for the most part, these biomes are meant to generate, say, like around actual official mountains, but in certain scenarios, you could find them just on their own. This one right here is known as the Snowy Slopes, and once again, I believe it's supposed to be generating around an official mountain, and this technically is an official mountain, but again, it could generate on its own if it wants to. But some of the other mountainous biomes, such as the lofty peaks, the stony peaks, or the snow-capped peaks, are actually much more interesting. And this one is the frozen peaks right here, as it is seen right here with all this packed ice, with all this other types of things like that around the place. And before I forget, I should mention that the cloud level has actually been raised from Y128 all the way up to Y192, an addition of 64 blocks, which means that, yeah, having clouds on is actually somewhat viable now, and somewhat actually, usable rather than always clipping through your builds. I think it's also worth mentioning now that these mountains are actually capped all the way up at Y256. That way you actually have an extra 64 blocks of building space to build on top of a mountain if you actually want to. But I think one of the most interesting changes, at least for me as of this one update, is the fact that seeds between Java and Bedrock are much closer in parity. This seed I'm showing off right now is actually usable inside of Bedrock Edition. Even though I am showing it off on Java, it is actually, usable inside of Bedrock. These coordinates right here, this mountain right here, everything you see right here, you can find it inside of Bedrock Edition. There's a few minor differences, such as the way structures are placed around the place, but for the most part, the biome placements, the way the blocks are placed around, pretty much everything else is pretty much completely parody from one version to another. But at the beginning, I did say that there was one particular item that was being added inside the game, and that is a brand new music disc from Lena Raine known as Other Side. And I won't play the full song right here, but I will play at least a little bit of it right now. And I guess it's worth saying that unlike Pixep, this one is much more soothing and much more calming than the previous 1.16 music disc. And if you want to find this new music disc, then just have a look around strongholds or inside these little mob spawner areas, and then you have an actual chance of finding one like what we did right here. And I'm almost certain I've missed something inside this video, but that's pretty much the general pitch of this one update. Caves and cliffs and everything in between is being updated to make them much bigger and much more exciting than they were before. And I am so excited to see this update when it actually fully releases. But yeah, for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.